Hi, my name is Brian Sharp, and together we're going to come up with an emergency operations plan for you. Now, most people don't ever start their day saying, hey, I'm going to have something happen in my life that's going to cause a disaster or be an emergency. In fact, most of the time when we talk about surviving those kind of events, the survivors usually said, started out as a normal day. Now, in some cases, we do have some pre-warning and everything else like that. But again, most of the time, most people say it started out as a normal day. Then a tornado came through Joplin, Missouri, and man, people had an event in their life that changed it. So, the other thing that we found is that people that have a plan are more successful generally. Generally, people that have a plan are not going to end up needing as much assistance from government agencies and everything else because they thought this thing through. So having a plan is a very, very important thing. When it comes to the plan, it's my belief, this simple is better. And the reason being is because under high stress situations, human beings don't have a tendency to be able to think as clearly in the long term. They tend to have a tendency to think more in the short term, and having a written plan that's simple means that we're going to be able to follow that plan as we get to it, and we're not going to have to think too much about it. Years ago, the U.S. government came out with a campaign called The First 72 is on You. And what they said is that be prepared for 72 hours, which is 3 days, and be prepared to maintain yourself and your family for those 3 days. They've now kind of extended it, and they are saying more 3 to 7 days, and that's just based on some of the things that we found over the last couple of disasters that it's taken the government a little bit to get things in place and get things moving into the right direction. The other thing that the government's come up with is called the preparedness cycle, and we're going to talk about that right here. And what it is it's a way for people to think about how to be prepared for disasters. First thing that we're going to cover is the plan. The government or people that have, some idea of what they're doing start to work on a plan. The next thing that we do is we organize and equip. What kind of equipment do we need? What kind of organization do we need? How do we get that? How do we put that in our pockets before we ever have an event? The next thing that we start to talk about after that is training. If you've never operated some of the equipment that you're expected to operate in an emergency, you probably need to get some training on that. Once we have the training, then what we're going to do is we're going to exercise. We're going to actually take that equipment out, we're going to look at it, we're going to play with it, we're going to get some training and exercising on it. The next thing that we do is we're going to evaluate how that training or how that exercise went. Do we need more? Do we need a different kind of piece of equipment? What kind of equipment? Do we need different training? And if so, what kind of training? And that's going to take us back into that evaluation and improvement planning, which takes us back into planning again. Planning is very, very important, and the planning process is very dynamic. In other words, we can't just make one plan and consider that plan to be the only plan that we're going to need to do, because as we go through this cycle, we're going to find things that are going to need to be changed. Our plan's going to need to be changed. Our equipment's going to need to be changed. And all that's going to need to be reflected in that plan so that we can come out of our exercise, or in the case of a real event, and we can look at it and say, hey, we did a pretty good job. And we don't need to do a whole lot of improvements. In closing, I'd like to end a quote with Benjamin Franklin. Benjamin Franklin said, if you fail to plan, you are planning on failing. And I think that's very, very true in emergency planning.